Hello and welcome to my new tutorial. For this episode, we're gonna go back to the megacity that I did in my previous tutorials, but rather than doing a establishing shot like a white city shot, we're gonna go down on the ground. We're gonna look at the street level and see how we can expand our world and give it a different perspective. So I wanted to kind of go back a little bit and start the project where all projects should start, and which a lot of people nevertheless forget, which is at the reference and inspiration phase. So before you start anything, for me at least, before I start a project, I kind of find an image or find something or have an idea in my head. I remember something that I saw a long time ago or more recently, and that kind of stuck in my mind, and that serves as the starting point, the motivation, the inspiration for something I do. And of course, for this project, I kind of wanted to show this kind of street level, sci-fi, cyberpunk, whatever you want to call it. And of course, the first thing that comes to mind is like stuff like Blade Runner, Ghost in the Shell. And that's kind of my starting point. So in order to organize my thoughts and saying, rather than saying like, hey, I want to do a Blade Runner like city street shot, and then just immediately doing that and jumping into, I don't know, Blender or Modo or whatever you want to use, you should actually go back and bring a bit of structure in your thinking, in your brain, and collect all the references, the inspiration, the images that kind of pop in your head. Do some image Google searching, and organize your thoughts. So I made a folder here for inspiration. I have another folder for reference, and of course for the files I work with. So I did some Google image searching just to remind myself really what the kind of mood I want to go for, and inspirational images that can serve as a starting off point. So I collected a few frames from the movie itself, from Blade Runner, which I'm sure everybody knows, to kind of like get a feeling for what I want to go for, like dark, neon lit, dirty, futuristic, that kind of stuff. Lots of street lights and interesting shapes here for parking clocks or whatever. So other images that I have here and ideas that I like to explore, of course, I love these umbrellas, and I kind of want to make an homage to that in my image. There's a couple of Sid Mead paintings that were done for the movie, to see what kind of shapes he's using, what kind of styles, to see if there's any more ideas I can bring over into my image that can serve as inspiration. Also have some of my stuff that I did for Ghost in the Shell. It's not bad to get to use your own images as inspiration, especially if, for example, clients ask, "Oh, I love what you did there and there. Please use that, or do something in that style." So it's not a bad thing to use your own images there. Some Ghost in the Shell stuff, just a lot of things in here that kind of should give me a little bit of a direction in terms of the overall style and mood I want to do. Most importantly, the inspiration images, however, are very different from the reference images. We take these as a general guide of the kind of feeling we want to convey, rather than copying this one-to-one. So let's have a look at the reference. And here I want to be a bit freer. I want to bring in some of my own interests, since this is kind of a personal project kind of thing. So I can be a bit more free in the terms of things I pick up here. So I wanted to actually look at a lot of real world, contemporary kind of city streets, mostly in Japan. Shibuya crossing here, to just get an idea of how it looks today. There's a lot of examples of lighting. Very interesting lighting scenarios here. How the sun comes in. I'm not going to do like a daylight scene for this one, but nevertheless, it's interesting how to see how other photographers capture the light in order to tell a story, which we also want to do. And it doesn't matter here if this light comes from the sun or if this light comes from some artificial light source. We want to kind of pick up on the kind of storytelling ideas and the kind of ways we can use light as a way to compose and breathe life into our images. Now, your reference collection should probably look very different depending on the kind of things you like, the kind of things you want to emphasize, the kind of things you see in these images. So reference does not mean the same, does not give the same people the same kind of ideas, because everybody has their personal preference. Everybody looks for something different in these images. And maybe I collect this image because I want to look at the lighting, the texture on the floor, that kind of stuff. Somebody else might look at this picture and might take cues for the kind of composition they want to do. Then a third person might look at, okay, I want to look at the fashion of this lady here, and I need that as my reference, the pattern on the back or whatever, how the skirt falls, the kind of pattern print or whatever, right? So everybody has a different kind of idea of what this reference represents for them, what they get out of it, right? Same as like here, somebody might look at, again, the lighting or even the color grading. People might look at the kind of the texture, like the roughness of how rough the texture looks up here. Other look at the signage, other look at the cars or whatever. So again, the same reference does not necessarily need to mean the same thing to everyone. But it's really what you get out of it, if it's useful, right? If this kind of lighting is really useful to you, then it's a really good reference. So for me, I mean, I'm going to look at a variety of things. I really like the messiness, but at the same time, the messy organization of this, how it's like torn apart, but it still looks kind of neat with all these plants here. For example, here I really love the design of the gate, and God knows how that can be useful later on. These kind of images can give more of like a feeling that I want to achieve. This image is a good reminder of like to bring in different levels of elevation instead of just having like a really flat looking street kind of environment. So there's a lot of different things I can see here. Here maybe I'm looking at the density of the buildings, how close they're together, and if that's something I want to look at. Here is, for example, the color contrast and the value contrast. That's really interesting to look at, the dark to light. Some images will be closer to what we're doing in the final, and something like this might not necessarily be as close, but hey, there's a dude in an umbrella, so that's pretty good. I usually throw in a lot of different things just to have them there, and then usually I make a more distinct selection. Like this is pretty cool, the kind of sky that is here. Very strong color grading. Maybe that's something we can bring in. So you see there's a lot of stuff. I like the almost like a retro tech feeling here. It's kind of juxtaposition of like cars on the ground, cars hanging from the top. This is the kind of thing that I probably want to go for more. Lots of peoples with umbrellas, a lot of them. And then if we pair that with something like we had in Blade Runner, like these glowing handles, I think that's going to look pretty cool. And if you darken it down so we can really see the umbrellas and all the reflections on the umbrellas. So that was an image that was probably a bit closer to what we want to do. here it's a pretty cool image about maybe obscuring part of it and revealing other parts. So that's, I think, a topic that I like very much as well. Shooting through a glass to see the reflection on top of what's going on behind the glass. Also very cool. Again, the revealing and hiding of certain elements is certainly something we want to explore. So these kind of images are closer again to, I think, the final mood. Something like this, I think, is pretty good in capturing the atmosphere. So let's see what else we have. This is probably a bit too tight. I think we're gonna get really into trouble in terms of like the camera placement. And I want to have like a large crowd of people rather than having this really confined space. But this gives us an interesting feel with like the drizzling rain, the lanterns, the floor. This is also could be very good key image. So as we go through these, this is pretty cool for shapes. As we go through these, what I usually want to do is, as you see, I have a lot of different things in here. What I want to do is I probably want to, I have a folder here called key images. I want to go in there and right now I have a few in here already selected that kind of serve as my images that I will use to kind of determine the style and the final look of the image. So I want to probably throw in a few more. That I think are worthwhile. Let's just collect a few here and there. Here, these ones. So you can either do like a subfolder, so you have it like this. You can also kind of do the old school way where you take these and you drop these into like into an empty document in Photoshop, and you kind of arrange yourself like a little mood board. However you want to do that. There's no right or wrong. As long as you have, I think, a convenient way of accessing these kind of images and grouping them and having them maybe on your external monitor or somewhere else handy. Even if you want to print them out, you're free to do anything. As long as you can easily, I think, refer back to them. So that's usually how I work with reference and inspiration. You can do multiple mood boards. You can do as many as you want, but I would always try to limit the amount of images on one of these to maybe 10 or a dozen. If you have a mood board with like 500 images on it, I think that's pretty counterproductive because your mind cannot focus. That means you haven't really made up your mind in terms of what you want to show. I think it's really a good exercise to make decisions to say I want to go this way and not that way. I want to decide for this and against something else, so that you can kind of move decisively forward and make progress. If you have too many images, if you cannot make any decisions, then your final image will also show that, and it will look unfocused and not very distinct or unique. So that's one way of doing it, of cutting down the amount of references you look at. Another thing I wanted to mention is that a lot of people, they tend to get to a certain stage. They make quite good images, but then at some point they kind of fall apart and when it comes to details, and they say they don't know how to continue. When it comes to that, then the only answer is that you need to go back and collect a different set of references. So it's not like you just do this research in the beginning, and then you make your mood boards, and then until the end of the project you stick to that, right? And you don't look at anything else, right? That's not how it goes, actually. So let's say for the all over mood, we have a mood board, and that kind of helps us to establish the color palette, the shapes, and a lot of things that help define the image in the beginning. But then when it comes to details, when it comes to fleshing out the world and bringing the image to a finish, a lot of things then fall apart. But the only really answer is that, okay, now you need to go back and have a closer look, like, okay, how for example do these electricity poles look like? What's the ground texture like, right? What kind of difference in textures do we have on the buildings? What kind of colors? Like how does this kind of how do the electricity poles look up there? How do the signs, how are they attached to the walls? All these kind of things you need to then do more research of and look up, right? Let me see where else is there a good example. So like here, like how are these pieces connected? How do they hold up the train here, right? What kind of details are there in terms of nuts and bolts and patterns and shapes and all over feeling, right? How is this curtain here connected to that? All these kind of things you should at one point or the other take note of and figure out how to indicate or how to model or how to show in your images if it's necessary, right? Of course, if we zoomed out, right, we have a different set of details to consider, right? We're not going to be so up close, so it's less about, it's less about nuts and bolts. It's about distribution of cars and the kind of mist in the air and the details of like where the street lights, how tall are the trees, where the cars, like what part of the car do we really see? Because we do not need to detail the car like all the way, right? We can have a fairly rough block out and then accentuate the car details where they are actually catching our eye in terms of chrome parts, the number plate and the little indicators and lamps and that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's really what I wanted to mention about reference, and it's a crucial part, I think, of the designing process that a lot of people either spend too much time on or try to get around and not do at all, and it usually shows a lot in their work. So I just wanted to make sure that we have at least mentioned this once. And once we have all this in place, we can actually jump into our 3D package and start putting something together here. So here we are in Modo now. You can use any 3D package for this kind of modeling and kitbashing. There's nothing specific to Modo I'm using here, so people always ask, can I use Cinema 4D? Can I use Blender? Yeah, of course you can. There is nothing really specific I'm doing with Modo here. It's just that I used Modo for so long. I'm just most comfortable in this package. I have provided the entire kitbashing modeling process as a time-lapse here, not time-lapse, sorry, as a sped-up video that you can also watch if you're really interested in how I puzzled everything together. Here in this video I'm gonna explain more about the kind of choices I made looking at the thing as a whole. So I'm trying to zoom out a little bit. I probably modeled and bashed way more than I need, but that's kind of what I happen to do. I used to do kind of things on a per shot basis, but now I kind of you can see like I kind of made like a little diorama. It's kind of closed from all sides, and what it allows me to do, and the reason why I'm doing this is that I can more freely move around with the camera and capture different angles of things. I'm really building like almost like the scene how it would be in real life, how I would imagine it to be. That kind of came out of a necessity for certain movies and games to spend more time in 3D and fleshing out a space to a certain specification, which could then be sent to an art director, and he could more accurately imagine if this would be buildable on a soundstage, or if his early calculations were wrong and it needs to be bigger or smaller, and something can work, something cannot work. And for my own interest in photography and videography to come through and to allow me to take my Octane camera or whatever renderer, your Redshift camera, and go in here and shoot this scene from all different angles, and give me more freedom, and of course a lot more images in the end to work with. If I would work on a per shot basis, I would probably spend less time in 3D, and but then that shot could only work in that configuration, and I would have no option to like go around left and right and use different kinds of lenses and that kind of stuff to play around with it. And that's just kind of the way I like to work these days. And that also would allow me to make like little animations and stuff like that, if my processing power would allow it. So you can see it's the scene here is really a mix of different things, and it is actually largely kitbashed, as you can see. So there are different elements here. There's objects here that have already some sort of texture applied that came with the models. So I'm sure you guys all know the usual suspects like Kitbash 3D, like here's that Hong Kong thing set, and then there's like Vitali's megacity. That's kind of just like background fillers here. In this instance, there's billboards I have from a different Kitbashing set. There is like a little Japanese buildings. There's details like I think there's also something from Vitali which I turned into like a futuristic trash can. I think these kind of guys here were like traffic lights I enlarged to make them into screens, kind of like retro 80s screens, kind of say something you would find in Blade Runner. Lots of air cons and pipes, and some of these things here I modeled myself. I used it for, excuse me. I really went deep into my old projects and reused a lot of these things. I made these a couple of years ago. It's like aircon here for something different, and these ducts here and all sorts of stuff. And I reuse whatever I can, because we always say like 3D is so good because you can reuse a lot of the old stuff. But then I noticed I often don't do that. So I dug really deep and isolated some of the things, like these poles I had also from a really old project. These lamps as well, and I reused them again here. The gutter here, the canal under here. You don't even see it, but I just had it lying around, and rather than making a new one, I can just reuse it. These pillars I used for my temple project recently that I did in Blender, and I kind of played around with it. You can see in the time lapse in the video, in the modeling video, that I kind of just took my pillars that I had and I was kind of twisting them to give them more of the look that we had in Blade Runner. again, I could have modeled these from scratch, but this is quite a detailed environment, so I don't want to spend so much time on everything. And if I have something that kind of works, then I might as well use it. I haven't even modeled that much specifically only for this one. I think some of the bigger parts that kind of I didn't have before, like these kind of blocks here, the rough blocks of the buildings. Then here's some Vitali pipes in there. Here's something again from my machine, from the temple project I did. Some lanterns that, I mean, these are modeled, but I mean, they're super simple. Some curtains that I had before that I did a Marvelous Designer. And I just throw them. I don't know what, I think these curtains were like for like a bedroom, but might as well put them here, throw like a transparent material on it, and it's gonna look like some of the stuff I had in my reference. Staircases also from a 3D project, from a black and white project I did a long time ago. And then here you see I just populate everything with like lots of air cons. I get lots of extra free detail by plugging all this stuff in here. Some more like stuff from, I think, Vitali in here. These kind of dividers I modeled myself. Well, that's not too difficult. The ground, of course, is I modeled in here, but you see it's very, very basic. What's important to see is that, what we should take a look at is that very early on, and I think you've seen that in the sped up video, is that these guys here, these scale people, they need to be there right from the beginning. If you start modeling, if you start building stuff, and you don't have these, you have no anchor point, you have no reference point of how big, how wide, how tall things need to be. These guys here give everything their meaning and their scale, so that you know exactly, like, okay, like the opening here needs to be that wide, the railing needs to be this high, the screens need to be this big, otherwise it makes no sense, like otherwise they cannot see anything. The entry for the subway has to be this high, the railing this high. You need to do some research into how high are electricity poles, right? And all these buildings, all these windows and doors are scaled according to how tall these people are. How high do the lanterns need to hang in order for not to hit the people on the head? How big should the scale of these pipes be to actually make sense? How big does the billboard need to be in order for people to actually be able to read it? All these kind of things you need to take care of, and they all fall in place. Well, they become easier. Fall in place is probably a bit misleading, but they all become a lot easier once you have these people in here. And you should never ever start any scene without having a scale figure in there. So that is that. In terms of design, I mean, I've looked at a lot of the reference I had, the inspiration I had. And a few things that I wanted to do is that I knew there got to be a lot of lights, right? I wanted to have a lot of screens here. We have these lanterns. We have lights from the billboards. We have lights from the street lights. We have some additional colored lights on these thingies here, whatever they are, parking structures. Maybe they can put like their bicycles there, or they're hovering, whatever, scooters. I wanted to have little lights everywhere, so that when I place my camera here, and of course these lights here on the umbrellas, that when I have my camera here and I kind of want to focus maybe on this guy, that once the background is out of focus, I have this really nice bokeh of all these, the blurry lights in the background, and I have a really rich background full of life, instead of just having it completely dark. So I needed to think about a lot of kind of lights that are kind of maybe as high as the human head, or a bit higher than that. I'm also gonna add where we have these mustard colored ugly things. I'm gonna throw some textures on there, some emissive textures, in order to simulate some shop entries, storefronts, that kind of stuff. And of course, I'm going to use a lot of reflective materials in order to bounce these lights around. Maybe I'm going to even use some glass, some plastic, see-through to again give the illusion of complexity where it really not is, right? It might be a pretty dense environment, but it's actually overall only like 5.5 million polys, which is really not that much. And I mean, a lot of them are just like up here where we don't see them. So for efficiency's sake, actually, I should get rid of a lot of them. But I mean, on the one hand, maybe I want to do like a shot going up like this, and it would be nice if I have some like details of the lights here and the windows up there, or maybe well, on the other hand, I'm just too lazy. So I don't want to bother. And I think my machine is going to be able to handle it fairly okay. So I shouldn't worry too much. Of course, if you have like 20, 30 million polys suddenly in there, then you should better have a lot of video RAM and a lot of graphic cards to be able to handle all this stuff, right? So you kind of need to get to know your GPU a little bit in terms of what it can handle, and keeping your deadlines in mind, right? You cannot design the most beautiful scene ever seen in history, and then your PC cannot render it in time for the client's deadline, because then you completely failed, and they're not going to pay you and fire you. So always keep that in mind, right? Keep it practical, keep it doable. So one thing that in terms of technical setup I considered from the beginning is that there's no point in duplicating all these guys here as actual geometry and placing them around. I'm going to export this as an FBX or OBJ and then bring it into Octane standalone and render it there. So if I actually add this all as like additional geometry, is going to blow through the roof. I'm going to use these, I'm going to take these, export them as a separate object, and then bring them into Octane and instance them around. And that way, the memory footprint will stay very low, but I'm gonna be able to have like hundreds of people here with not that much impact on my performance. Compared to if I would just duplicate these around, then I wouldn't even be able to load this into Octane. Which is a pretty neat thing. So that's why I just had like a group of 4 here, 4 different kind of models in standing as a different orientation, and then I'm just going to copy this group around and place it here and rotate it and place it here, and then and so on. And we'll go. That will be all done in Octane. So. Of course, you can see it's like pretty ugly right now. There are a lot of different colors. I just added these colors so that I know I have different kinds of materials assigned to all these buildings and ground and screens. And I mean, the selection of the color here has no implication of what it's going to look like in Octane, right? So these are these already have applied the material because that's how the Kitbash set came. But these are also going to be meaningless in Octane. We're going to have to redo the material in Octane. And that's, I mean, good and bad. It will take a bit of time, but at least we have more control over it. So a lot of times I see that in Kitbashing people are using, it looks too random and it doesn't fit in terms of scale, and it looks like Kitbash, and I hope this one doesn't look too much like it. I mean, in the end, we're still gonna do like a bit of a paint over to harmonize everything where needed. But I think the main message that should come across is that you should Kitbash responsibly, right? Be careful in how you approach that, and the kind of thing that has to happen is that once you know where you want to place your camera, mostly, you need to apply the same kind of rules that you would apply during a painting, that around the area of interest, there needs to be more detail, right? There's no point in having super highly detailed background buildings and then the front is like super simple. So you need to kind of see like, okay, that around the area where there's most of the stuff happening, there needs to be more detail, right? And then towards the back, it doesn't really matter, right? There should be like I would consider like, okay, if I place my camera here, right, I have this building here in the background, and it kind of blocks most of the view, and maybe I can have some fog in the background. I'm not going to see much in there anymore, so I don't need all the detail. Or this one here, it's like completely simple blocks, right? But it's further removed from where I'm going to shoot a lot of stuff. So here's where there needs to be more detail, more air cons, lanterns, and screens and other details. And I can't foresee everything, right? There might be places where like, oh shit, I should have added something there, I should have added something here. And then we can just add these later or change the scene and reload it into Octane, and then we need to iterate from there on, right? This is kind of like our first stab at things. I think it's going to be pretty okay, but as you get better at imagining what the final looks like and getting a better idea of like where you need to place your detail in the first place, this whole process will go a lot faster. So again, you can watch the sped up version of the entire process in a different video here, but I hope you got a better idea of how I built this kind of scene. You can see I have like stuff on the rooftop, but you might not be able to see it, or you might even be only able to like see like the top of it. Like you go here, and then you can see here some of the top of the buildings, right? A certain amount of things you will see, other amount you won't see. Some of it is like just kind of me, like my need to be able to fully envision what this place would look like and feel like, even if I don't see much of it, even if I might not be able to shoot some of these scenes later on because I just totally forgot about it, right? But it's the all over feeling. Like I need to be able to imagine like, okay, I can look up here and it's gonna look pretty awesome, right? So I know kind of in my heart almost that the scene is going to work, right? Because I'm sufficiently invested in this kind of world, in this world, that I can make some good images with it. And like I mentioned before, like changing elevation is always, I think, something very important to give more life to a scene, right? If you didn't have these stairs going down or these stairs here going up, then it would just feel like very fake, very flat, right? We have like a canal under it. For me, it's always very important to indicate, to show, and to know that there is something below the surface and there's something higher up, right? That's very important in communicating a real world, that there's something down there, there's a gutter, there's a subway, there's something going on, right? That helps me to imagine and be more feel the scene more, feel it better. So I tried to make everything kind of work together and kind of make sense, right? So in terms of the things that are on the buildings, the kind of support structures. So again, down here I have more detail, especially more human-sized detail. Up here it's really just like a big block that kind of blocks the light or gives some kind of indication. I can paint on top of that later, and that's fine. Nobody's gonna notice. So, but down here, I really need to be able to, like, on the height of their heads, I need to be able to have a pretty convincing amount of detail in order to sell this scene. And the aim, of course, is that I spend most of my time in 3D. I don't want to go too much back into Photoshop and paint over again and again and again, right? Because I want to actually do a variety of shots. I want to do like a dozen shots, and if I have to touch up every one of them in the same way in Photoshop, that's not really time worth spent, right? It's better spent to like figure out in 3D what it's going to look like, and then I have it in all 12 shots, and that's more efficiently done, I think. It's just because I don't like this kind of tedious work where you have to copy and paste the same thing into every frame and skew it and do all sorts of nonsense. Rather fix it here and then you have it everywhere. And you can reuse it for your future Cyberpunk city image, and because there will always be a lot of Cyberpunk images. God knows what happens in 2 years. Because you do want to work on Akira, right? So that's going to be handy. Okay, so this is the scene in Modo. Please have a look at the sped up version where you can see every little detail of what I did, and all the secrets and trash cans, whatever. So it's definitely worth digging through your old projects in 3D to dig up everything you can find there that can possibly fit. It's also very wise to, I think, invest in certain Kitbash sets and certain assets, textures, models, accessories, whatever you can get your hands on. There's so much stuff out there these days that is really high quality and super useful. So I definitely recommend spending a few bucks on that. And there's always a sale around the corner, so you can pick them up for a little bit cheaper. But never forget that you can't kitbash everything all the time, right? You need to be able to have a kitbash piece in here and then at the same time model something that you can attach to it, that you can modify it, that has pretty seamless or fairly seamless like you wouldn't see the difference in quality too much. I mean, there's one thing of you can buy some amazing real looking models these days, but then if you can't make any design changes to them in 3D and have it look seamless, then that's pretty bad for your future job prospects, right? Then the client will think like, oh, you can plug in some pretty cool stuff here, but like, okay, let's make this bigger, let's make this wider, can you design an accessory for it? And then if you can't do that to the same quality, then you got to be you got to invest some time in learning that. Whether that's in 2D or 3D doesn't matter, but always got to make sure that the skills are up to par, I think, in that regard, right? We cannot rely only on kit bashing or photo bashing, right, which is pretty much the same thing, all the time, right? We need to be able to design something that is of equally high quality. Okay, so that's it for this part, and now we're going to jump into Octane and have a look at what we built there. Okay, here we are in Octane now. So that's my network here. It looks maybe confusing, but it's actually very simple, and I usually don't use very difficult shader setups. I'm more the drag and drop kind of guy. So, but with lots of materials, you kind of end up with something semi confusing at the end. And look at how messy this is. But we'll go through it, and you'll understand. It's pretty easy. So a couple of different parts to it, different blocks. So maybe zoom out one more time. This is for the actual architecture here on the left side. This thingy here is the people and the shaders for the people. That's some additional stuff I had to plug in later. And these are all the different shots. So for every different shot, I usually do a different, just copy and paste a render target, and then I can go here, and now it's going to take a bit of time to load because it is quite heavy. Let me make this a bit smaller here. So you see that's that shot, and then if I click on the next one, it has different settings, different camera. So I have a different shot, and you see it takes quite some time to resolve because there's a lot of shit going on. But to show the different aspects, maybe we'll take this shot. We can make it a bit smaller, so I need to find out what looks good and what you guys can see, and that we can still focus on my stuff down here. So these are all the different render targets, and I mean I'm usually using nothing special. I have my own kind of settings, and I think if you followed my previous tutorials, you kind of know what they are. So I like to play a lot around with the focal length. So here I'm using a 20mm lens. I want to have everything fairly sharp, so I chose an f-stop of 20. It's probably way too much. You can go to something like 11, is still fine, or 16. For some of the other shots, like I used maybe like a 2.8, a really fast lens, so the background is all blurred out. Other settings I use here, actually there's nothing else. I like to add a little bit of distortion, just to get a bit of real world feel, because no lens that you ever use is completely straight, and sometimes in let's see what it does. So it just adds like a tiny bit of lens distortion, and that makes it a bit more organic, makes it a bit more round, whatever. I mean, you play around with it. If you use higher values, it looks really strange, and so you kind of got to figure out what looks best and what just adds that tiny bit that does it for you. I use there's nothing in the background. I don't need like a daylight environment or anything. I don't really see the background at all, so I have just like a texture environment, set it to bluish tint to everything, but I very, very low power, so it's almost completely dark, because I want the illumination to come from artificial light sources predominantly, right? And if anything, yeah, I just want to have like a bluish tint to the image, and that's all. And then another basic thing that I have is I applied a medium, so I have like environment, like a uniform environment fog in there. The settings, again, you need to play around with it, right? So what creates this kind of fog is usually a mixture of the colors of the absorption and scattering. You can tint your environment in different ways. So if you really love pink, then of course this is inverted. This one, yeah, you can see how it becomes a different tint. It's blue again. These have all different, but it's not too strong, so I can ramp this up. So now you would see more of a tint, and you see how this creates very different kind of look to the scene, but it's maybe a bit too much. So I don't want to have like a crazy amount in there. You play around with the density, which usually has to be really, really low, and the medium radius, which, depending on how much fog you want and how big your scene is and how close and how far away objects are, you need to ramp that up a lot. But that's, I mean, I think this has been covered like so many times, so I don't want to go over it too much. In addition to this environment fog, the uniform one, I've added a localized fog. I'll get to that in a minute before I go here through the other settings. Resolution, I always like to have 239 by 1 kind of cinema scope. Aspect ratio, you can use whatever you want. I use the imager a lot. So I usually use a different kind of response curve here, kind of like a LUT color grading within it. You can use whatever you want. I mean, these do different things, and you need to you need to use these in tandem with all the other settings of exposure and color and lights and everything. Use whatever you like, or don't use it at all. You can apply these later in Photoshop. I just kind of like to have a little bit of it in my renders. I use a lot of vignetting, which makes the corners darker. And the rest is pretty, I think I'll leave it standard. The post-processing is sometimes pretty nice, even if overused. Add that bloom, that glare a little bit. I feel like for at least for environment renders, it adds that little bit of realism. I make the glare ray amount to 190 degrees and blur it completely. Otherwise, you get these crazy. Let me see, can we see it? Otherwise, you get these crazy. No, you can't see it. You get these crazy glares, these like stars and stripes in it that you don't want to have it look like Star Trek. I mean, maybe you want it, but I'm not going for that right now. So you can add that or not add that. You can add it in Photoshop later. But for me, the thing is by adding these kind of things, it gives different results in camera, and it sometimes makes you go for choices that you would otherwise not consider. So that's why I do these in here, and maybe that gives me less control later, but again, it makes me do different choices here. So and these guys here all have sometimes slightly different settings. Let me look at something with a really, like you can see this image here has a really blurred out background. There's an f-stop of 4. And once you adjust this, you would actually get, like if you go for like 20, you see how the background is very sharp. If you go for 4, the background is blurred out. Here with the AF picker that you can activate here, you can choose where you want your sharp area to be, right? So that where everything is in focus, where you want that to be, right? The rest is out of focus. And you can adjust it. You can click on anything and it's going to change. So let's get back to this one. So here, as I said, I added something else, different objects. Like this is basically this line in the back here and this streak here. I felt like, you see now it's gone, but I can connect it again. What I wanted to have here is like something. I felt like I needed something against the to kind of not give it an end, but kind of have something to against the crowd of people. It was getting kind of too dark down here, so I added that one as additional illumination. I plug in a diffuse material with a texture emission, and then add an image that gives me like light information. Basically, the image is shooting the light out based on the image information. You can see that very well. Sorry, I do not know which one these are. Here you see. So that is the image here, and I can play with the power. So if you dial it down to 5, you can see the kind of like image it is. It has all these like light streaks in the back, and depending on, I enable surface brightness, and then I play with the power, and then you can see how strong or light it's gonna be, right? So you can play around with that. So that is this part here, right? You can see, right, this part here. And here again is that fog. It's like it's a fog that is from Jama's tutorial. So please buy Jama's tutorial. It's really good. Octane one, any one of his anyway. I plug that into a placement node, which goes into our geometry group here. And the geometry group is where everything comes together, where all the geometry comes together. So I have my scene in here. I have this one are the people, and here's anything additional. You can add input, and you can make this geometry group bigger and bigger and bigger, and add more stuff to it. And then I have this fog here. You have I'm setting a placement node. Placement, geometry, placement allows you to use these kind of things here. Now they don't show up because my Let me see if I can, maybe here. Here. So it gives you these handles to scale, rotate, or this gizmo here, and then you can move your stuff, right? You can use it with or without, but if you want to move this fog thing around, if you want to move it up, down, left, right, make it bigger, make it smaller, skew it, then you need this. Again, there's so many tutorials out there who do this. Don't think I need to go over it in detail. Again, it's a VDB file. There's plenty of them out there. You can buy them. You can buy my last tutorial with a spaceship. I had some VDB files included there to play around with. And then this messy thing here is basically the instancing around of all these people. I have a separate video of that where you can have a look how I built this. But basically, here is the geometry group, and here is our actual OBJ with the people and the umbrellas, the 4 people that we saw in the beginning. So what I've done is that I've added another group here. What that means is that I have used these 4 people here and made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 instances of it. So I go out into a placement node, I go into this geometry group, which means I have 4 people here. And then I do these same 4 people and through another placement node. And I use this placement node to push these people around, move them to a different location, rotate them. And then I have here 8 people, and I have 12, 16, 20, 24, 28. So this geometry group contains 28 people. Right? And then because it's not enough to populate everything, I need more people. I need to generate them quicker. So now that I have these people with different placement nodes rotated in different directions or different orientations, whatever, I have this group of 28 people. And then I'm going to go out into this additional geometry group. And then I make another instance of this group of 28 people. And I go in here. And then I make another copy of 28 people. And another one. It's like 28, 56. And then here's 116. And then it goes on and on and on and on, right? And my math is pretty bad, so I can't add that up so quickly. But here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 280. There are 280 people in this group here. And then I make not 1, but 2 of them. So I have 560 people on this scene, all with umbrellas. It was a crazy fire sale. I don't know. Because they all seem to be from the same manufacturer. I don't know. So you see I have these 2. I can copy large amounts a lot quicker. Instead of having like, if I was going to do like 280 people via these placement nodes, I'm going to go crazy. I will go crazy, right? So maybe there's more efficient ways of doing it, but I don't know. I'm sure somebody will message me again and tell me how it's done better, so I'm just waiting for that. Please tell me how to do it better, but that's the only way I know. So again, these 2 are all the people, and then here I have my OBJ. And then here, simply these 4 are the people these are 3D render people that I bought from some website, and they come with their own maps. So I have I add a glossy material. It comes with a color map, a specular map, and a normal map. Maybe overkill. So sometimes these come with like 16K textures for close-ups, but then, scale them down, use like 4K textures or 2K textures, because you see like a lot of them we won't even see up close, and it's just a waste of memory. And not that I'm the smartest person when it comes to using memory, but use it to the degree that works, right? For what your GPU is. Maybe you have 1 or you have 2. I have 2 1080 Ti that are running here, and it looks still pretty okay. And the good thing is that even though we have 560 people, the memory is still pretty efficient because we're using instances instead of like copying these people. If I had 560 people times like 500,000 polys each, that is a shitload of geometry if I would have done it in Modo. So here we have the other materials. I have the glowing stick thing for the umbrella. I have a lot of stuff I use from the Live DB, so I dragged in an aluminum for the metal parts of the umbrella. I have a plastic for the plastic parts. And here I have the cover, the plastic cover. So let's do the plastic cover first. I made a mixed material out of, out of a specular. Here I'm using a raindrop file that I got from Zomax. Christoph Demmerich, extraordinaire 3D artist, get his raindrop displacement map. It's amazing. If you've been using it for years, plug it into the specular material here. It's visible in the close-ups. It's probably complete 32-bit overkill, but it holds up close really, really well, and it's amazing. I mix it with another specular material that has like a plasticky crease texture applied, so I get all these like shiny reflections of all the lights that I want. I plug it in together. I mix it. I invert that texture and mix it in the amount here, and I experimented a little bit, and it looks okay like that. There's probably easier or better ways to do that, but I like a bit of experimentation, and whatever works for me. I'm not the best shader person probably to ask, but that's what I do. So here in the glow stick thing, what I did here is that I didn't want to have the same color glow for every stick, even though now I do, but I couldn't go in and individually do all of these separately, right? Because they're instanced, and I didn't want to make a different material for every one of them. So I wanted to have a random distribution of colors, or even I wanted to have some have the glow stick, some don't have it, right? And that can be done randomly. So I did a diffuse material texture emission, but into that texture emission I plugged in a gradient. And into that, in the input texture, I put a random color texture node. So this one just has a seed here. I plug this into a gradient, and from the gradient, I can assign different kinds of colors. You can add more of these little dots here, because in the beginning it will just have 2, but you can add more by pressing plus or minus. So I experimented, and it looked a bit like Christmas tree craziness by having too many different colors. But you can add all of these. You can add different colors, and you can make your own kind of color ramp. And you can see here how now all these different geometries, all these different instances are getting populated with different kind of colors, exactly picked from the colors that I added here. And that looks pretty okay actually, but if you put everything and it's really colorful, and it looks completely crazy. So I didn't opt for that. And I didn't want to have it too like messy in terms of colors. So you see how you can add all of these colors, and then you can this random color texture will actually assign these randomly to all of these. It's pretty cool. You can do that for billboards or other stuff. Yeah, and that's how I did that one. Okay, so let's see. That's the OBJs with the people and the umbrellas. Next step, what do we have? Yeah, actually we're getting to the main thing. So look at that. That looks completely awful and unusable for anybody but me. So if you are a better node artist than me, then you probably make this a bit more a bit cleaner. I could clean it. You can here rearrange, and so it makes everything pretty. But often I have my own sense of things. So on the one hand, I use a lot of pre-made materials. Again, the live database. Again, materials are not the most fantastic, but they're pretty good for the most part, right? And sometimes you just really need a basic aluminum, or you need a basic chrome, iron, or whatever. And then you plug that in, and then you can double click, and then you can dive deeper and change it to according to what you want. You can plug in different roughness maps or different projection types. But sometimes you just need standard stuff. And I have a lot of objects here, and some of them in the background, I really don't care about them, at least not for this scene. And so I tend to like, oh, this is some kind of like metal, this is another metal, one more metal, so I just use the same kind of metal material for all of them. And then I see what happens, and if it works, then I'll just plug in, I leave it plugged in. If it doesn't work, then I maybe replace exactly that node, because you see there's a shitload of nodes. Some of these are made, shitloads of inputs here. Some of them I made myself because I deliberately chose it and made it in a funky color in Modo, and so I can change it here. But some of these also came pre-made with, like, for example, the Kitbash sets. And sometimes it doesn't make sense to go in and select everything separately and change it. So I left a lot of the maps from the Kitbash sets, but then I can just plug in here something and see what happens here, and then I'll change it, right? So besides all these ones that I dragged and dropped from the live DB, which sits here, of course. Here's the live database, the online database of Otoy. I made also some myself. So some of the, again, I need to re-plug in some of the Kitbash set stuff. So Kitbash came with like some UV air conditioning images. So I plug those in so I get them correctly. All the emissions I kind of have to take care of myself. So again, there's like all the billboards that plug in. I use the same kind of like gradient random color texture, so I get a slightly different color billboard illumination around it. And then these signs have their own separate texture, and of course some of the windows, some of the neon signs, right? So those I needed to select separately. And because I have this diorama all around me, I get all these reflections on the umbrellas everywhere, which is of course pretty awesome. And I have the screens, and I use a mixture here. You see, I use materials with black body emissions, which just pump out whatever color you give it. There is texture emissions with images in them. So I mean, the same as before, I have it. I select emission texture, and then I plug in an actual image, and then I use the kind of projection I want, and then I crank up or crank down the power or the surface brightness I enable, and then I get images here. For example, I on my screens I have now images of this lady here, and that's how you can illuminate using textures. So that you actually have a texture on the TV and it actually gives out a little bit of a glow. And that I've done like many times because I want to have different images here. Some of these I know I will replace later. I don't need to like be so finicky and like, oh shit, I need to like put like an image on every single one of them, like a different image. That becomes very, very time consuming, and it is maybe something still done quicker in Photoshop if you have a lot of these images. So again, a different kind of, I don't even know what this is anymore. Signage. Okay, there's some signage in there. It's probably this one here. And then we have, I need to look what these called. Yeah, for the ground, I have different kind of images. I usually use whatever fits. The only material that is a bit more complex, and that I buy a lot of textures, right? So here I have a concrete floor because for some of the shots I wanted to go closer to the ground, so I wanted something that holds up. I kind of built this out of course, the textures that come supplied with it, because these are really high quality. And then I usually, if I want to have it wet, I mix in a glossy material that is black and has some dirt texture in the roughness channel, and so I can control my reflections and it looks like a wet floor. Nothing special. It's very standard. But yeah, that's how it goes. So again, this looks intimidating. You just start at somewhere and then plug it in, and then you drag and drop a few more, and you plug in and plug in and plug in and plug in, and then eventually it's fully populated. And then you need to dial it in. Usually what I do is I start with my environment node and try to get the kind of feeling I want. So I make it really dark, and then, excuse me, I make it really dark, and then I add a few lights, and then see how add, like here, my few key light sources, and the rest doesn't really have any textures. So I can see how the image overall would look like with like the main things enabled, like the kind of environment lighting, and the kind of light sources that I have within the image. And then I can go from there, because the reflections and everything, they don't really make or break. I mean, they don't really they're not fundamental to the image. They are nice additional details and stuff, and are necessary, but the overall scene is still established by the lighting. So you need to make sure that you start the lighting first, and then you go on to the materials. That's how I do it. And then we have pretty much, we went through everything. You see, these are really, really simple. It's just that I take like the glass shader and connect them to all the different glass, because in the end there's only like so many different materials in here. There are not that many. There's like some concrete, there's some tiles, there's some neon, there's some plastic, there's some metal, but overall that's pretty much it. And you shouldn't have, I think, too many different materials in a scene. It's going crazy otherwise. We can still change some of these here and there in Photoshop, and that's it, because I mean, we're not doing a final 3D here. So the last thing I wanted to just go through is like, I mean, we have done the camera, the materials, the environment, is the different passes. So you can enable these passes here. These are the passes we can save out later and use for compositing in Photoshop. Maybe you have some you like that I don't use, but I usually tend to have the beauty pass, of course, then the reflection pass, which looks like this. So all the reflections, it copies me. When I overlay this and put it into screen mode, which we are later going to see, is that it kind of gives me like a bump in brightness, and I can choose to add and delete these kind of highlights wherever I need them, whatever I want to accentuate. The volume gives me this, where the VDBs are the environment fog. So I can overlay that, and I can make it really foggy, or I can add more depth to it. And it also has this nice grain. Of course, if you let it resolve longer, then it will have less grain, but I like a little bit of grain. I have Z depth applied here. You can see how that looks, and in the beginning it might look a bit funky, but then you can play around here with a slider to get exactly the kind of distribution you want, from dark to white, and you can see all the different separation of the background items, so we can overlay that in, I don't know, screen or soft light, and get more depth to the image. I also use material ID, which is akin to something like a clown pass, where you get every material gets a different ID attached, and then we can make quick selections in Photoshop based on those materials. Not the best way, but it's pretty useful. So we have that. Yeah, these are all the different passes, and then you just save them out separately as either 8-bit or 16-bit images, depending on how you like to work. For me, I think 8-bit has always been enough. So yeah, now we have, I made 14 different images. I don't think I'm going to use all of them, but So usually when I like one, I go copy paste, and then I have another one, and I change it. So I make sure I don't touch this one. And then I have this one, and I rotate the camera around, right? I try to find my shots that I like. I've done that previously in so many tutorials. So you move around. It's good to have an understanding of how cameras work, how focal length and f-stop work. You really should do some research if you want to dig deeper into 3D. And see, it's pretty funky colors we have now here, because I added different colors in my gradient, so they might look a bit different to the final renders I'm saving out. And yeah, so I'm trying to find interesting compositions, interesting pieces. A good mixture of foreground, background, midground. You can see that these images will take a while to resolve, because there's a lot of stuff going on, but it should not take more than maybe 10 minutes to get this in a decent resolution. Yeah, so that's about all I'm showing for my Octane setup for the scene. So now we're going into Photoshop and doing some last minute touch up, color grading, add some photo bash where we need, and then we're done. Okay, here's now the image in Photoshop. I did a few renders. How many? 13 that I selected. It still work quite nice. Now I just wanted to show you, based on this one, kind of what I do with these images. Not every image needs the same kind of attention. So, for example, something like this needs a lot less paint over than something like this, right? Because here there's still a lot of things to figure out. In the end, it kind of depends on the mix of images you want to do. So here, for example, I just need to add the rain and some color grading, and that's it, right? But of course, you always want to have kind of like the money shot, kind of where you can see the environment as a whole. So this is probably more something like you would give to a client, right? And this is more kind of what I like to do myself. So let's see what we did here. So here you can already see I added we disable this, disable layer mask. So you can see this is the reflection pass that I saved out. By default, it looks like this. If I set it to screen, you can see how it accentuates the bright parts of the image a lot more. But it's a bit too strong, so I actually add a layer mask to only have these highlights in the lower part of the image, where I want to get the umbrellas a bit more readable. Another one is here, this is the Z depth pass. You see normal, it looks like that. I added another mask to get rid of the bottom part. Set it to soft light, and you can see how it changes the image quite drastically, pushing the brighter values to the back of the image. Then I also have the volume in here. The volume I set to screen as well. You can see here, if I set it to normal, it would look like a really bad case of pollution here, but I don't necessarily want to block out the image that drastically. So I set it to screen to get, I don't know, a hint of like, okay, there's like more billboards, more light sources that kind of make the fog appear a bit lighter. And then I have like also a mask I painted in there to not have the fog affect these areas here. Then I painted out this thingy here because I didn't want to have it in there. Add some blooming through some screen layer. I should say in terms of the stack here, the post-processing comes at the end, but I actually do the post-processing in the beginning. so that I can always see kind of like what my image would look like in the end. And here I use the color lookup tables like I usually do. I mean, people who follow my tutorials know that I do this all the time. So here I have I choose here the color lookup from the adjustment layers, and I choose here a variety of these 3D LUT files here, foggy night. I usually set them around 20 to 30 or 40%, and achieve the kind of look I want. This one is a different one. I just copy paste and then choose a different edgy amber or whatever. Stacking them up, using them in different opacities can create quite an interesting look, and you can build your own look. I add like a color balance where again push around the values a bit. Another lookup table. Another one, add a bit of vibrance to it, push up the saturation, and one more layer, more stronger vignetting. And then I have this, I can turn it off and on. I usually leave it on, and then I can copy paste it also to the other images. I don't apply this to all the images. This is a blanket approach. Every image needs its own kind of dialed in values to then have a decent looking set at the end that looks kind of similar. These kind of values might not work with this other image, which has a lot more dark values in it from the beginning. Here I'm putting in some photo bash, some building that I then adjust in terms of color and value to fit in here. I mean, I'm using the same kind of technique I've been using for my megacity tutorial, so you can check that one out. You can see I set these usually to screen. I usually choose images that have like a lot of light areas, then set it to screen, and Control L, play around with the darkness, so you can see I can have more lights or I can have less lights depending on what I want to have. And I skew these into perspective. Here these lights are found from like I think it's some kind of train station in Paris or something. I flipped them around and they look like futuristic street lights. They're aimed upwards, probably doesn't make any sense. Looks cool, I guess. Something in the back here to kind of get rid of the very blocky looking geometry. Some detail up here. Some detail down there. Some lanterns. Here what I did is actually took a shot from like it's the city from the top, but I flipped it around so that actually the buildings are all upside down. But it's not really noticeable. It just looks like a crazy high city stacked up towards the top. Works pretty well. Some of the cables here that I need to paint and that I didn't have the geometry for. And then, of course, rain. I purchased these rain particle images from, I think, Photobash. Some finer rain, some more close-up rain, a bit blurry. So you kind of get a sense of a little bit of depth in the rain. Because after all, these guys are all wearing umbrellas, so there must be a reason for it, right? So might as well let it rain. So yeah, that's really all about this image. So like I said here, the other ones work pretty much the same way. If I deactivate everything, you can see this is how the image looks. I'll add the reflection pass. I'll add, here in this case, I added the Z-depth pass with a screen overlay to make it a lot brighter because I felt the scene was quite dark. So I added the scene this way. So if I do it just via like soft light, it becomes just too dark. So you can also use screen. You can even adjust the value, so you can play with the cutoff values here. You can push it brighter, you can push it darker, however you want. You can double click on it, you can push these values. You say like, oh, I don't want to have the dark values affect the image, which also looks pretty nice. Some paint over. I have some lanterns here that I wanted to add some details. Some water streaks for his umbrella. I want the rain here to not be under the roof. So again here I said, oh, don't show the rain wherever the image is dark. See, be like this normally, but I got rid of that. And then of course my post-processing, so that this image looks kind of similar to that one in the overall terms. Okay, I could probably add lots of scratches and dirt and everything to the image, and maybe that will be required later if the client says, oh my gosh, I love this composition. And then we can take it further and really flesh it out with lots more detail, right? But I mean, for what it is, I think it's pretty damn good, because we have tons of other images, like for example this one, and lots more that we can see and deliver to the client. And in that sense, we're giving him a lot more to choose from. If he wants to finish one of these images further, he wants to add more detail, we can always do that later with the same kind of Photoshop bashing techniques that we have. But yeah, that's about what it is. So now we actually have completed this tutorial. I hope you found it useful, and I'm looking forward to the kind of worlds that you guys create, whether it be similar or something different. I hope this was useful, and hopefully see you in the next tutorial. Thank you.